Hi, this is Rex Brandstatter, your unofficial historian for the city of Coralville. And today's a special day here in Coralville. I thought maybe we better sit down and take a little break and let's go over some of the restaurants of Coralville in days gone by. Restaurants in Coralville of days gone by, well, that could be a million of them. You're right, and that's the fun part. I sat down not long ago and I put together a list, and totally, folks, right off the top of my head, but then the more I went, the more I talked to people, and the more remembrances I came up with. This is going to be fun. So sit down, take a break, and let's get started here with the restaurants of Coralville of days gone by. Now, Coralville, as you may or may not know, Coralville came to being in 1873. And back then, at that point, it was right down around the dam where Iowa River Power is today. They're still going. The Iowa River Power Restaurant and Flanagan's, they're still in business today. But that was basically downtown Coralville, and there was not much down there. There were no restaurants back in the day, that far back. And the closest that I can come up with a name is the mid-1930s. And so we'll start at that point in 1933, to the best of the records that I can find. The Wagon Wheel Tavern. Now, the Wagon Wheel Tavern is on the location right now of Golfzilla. I'll give you some local reference points today of the Golfzilla golf store down on 5th Street. That's where the Dinsmore family, that's where Gordon and Ethel Dinsmore, long time Coralville residents, they're gone now. They started a restaurant called Dinty's, D-I-N-T-Y-S. And Dinty's was located in this area near the Wagon Wheel. And they also, Dinty's then was later on up on 5th Street, on the south side of 5th Street where 7th Avenue is. So that was where Dinty's, and the Dinsmore family got started in the steakhouse business. Now, I'm going to fast forward to 1937, and I brought a little ad here. This is from the Iowa City Press-Citizen. And it says, Open Election Day. This is March 27th, 1937. Open Election Day, March the 29th. So obviously they hadn't coordinated their elections in November at that point. It said, come out and enjoy some cold beer. Steak Shop, Coralville. And here's the ad right here. So that's the earliest that I have in writing so far at this time. Well, the fun thing about this is this. Anyone going into business does so to make a profit. That is the goal. Sometimes achieved, sometimes not. But all of the people who started, owned, and operated these restaurants started with that goal. They also believed that they had the latest and greatest idea, the best business plan, the finest location, concept, and of course the best food, impeccable service, and so on in the restaurant business. So armed with most of these attributes, they went forth to rent, build, buy, or find a site here in Coralville to start with their dream. Some lasted only a short time, some lasted a long time. Some closed for financial reasons, health reasons, concept reasons, business climates, and so many more things that would make you leave your business. All of the people and the people who have come before them and after them believed that Coralville was the place to be, a growing town, endless supply of students for customers and workers, football crowds, hospital guests, visitors, university staff, etc. All of these restaurants were here for a reason, and all of them left for a reason. So our job is to remember them in the spirit of the American dream. Own and operate your own business, set your own hours, bring a product, service to the community, and last, and certainly not least, make money. So let's take some time and remember these. So these are not in any particular order. I have chosen one to go last. So if you're itching and you can't figure out which one it is, I'll remind you at the very end. An icon of Coralville will be the last one we look at today. So let's talk about Lowry's Steakhouse. And Lowry's Steakhouse came to town in 1948 and 1949, as a matter of fact. And this is a very, very milestone in Coralville for a lot of reasons. In 1949, Ermel and Margaret Lowry came to Coralville to start this restaurant. And at that time, presently for that, Ermel was working for his brother-in-law at the old Princess Cafe in downtown Iowa City, which would be right across from the Deadwood Tavern on Dubuque Street at the present time. So here they came to Coralville to do just what I just talked about, enter into business with their American dream. Now this Lowry's Restaurant, later the Carousel Restaurant, and present day it just got made into a brand new Chinese restaurant. We're on the northeast corner of the Coralville Strip and First Avenue / Hayden Fry Way. It's a brand new Chinese restaurant. Actually, the one that was there beforehand was flooded in '08, so the Chinese restaurant has only been open a short period of time. But take a look at this. This says Ermel and Margaret Lowry opened the restaurant, and they went in for business, started business in 1949. And I have a letter here from Margaret from Margaret Lowry that I'd like to read. In 1949, we opened the drive-in called Lowry's, the first drive-in with car hops in the area. There was an inside dining room that would seat about 35 people. After a few years, we enlarged the building to make a bigger kitchen and also added a room with a counter and more booths. In 1958, a faulty furnace caused a fire that burned the entire building except one wall. We rebuilt and opened it as the Carousel on New Year's Day of 1959. Now, local history tells you that New Year's Day 1959, Iowa was playing in the Rose Bowl. So it was a big, big day in Coralville. And in 1984, they sold the business. So they were involved in the restaurant down there into the 70s. And what a place it was, and what a corner it was on. Now, the car hop business was relatively new. This was after World War II, and the car hop business actually started in Texas before the war, but now it finally made it to Iowa. Just for a local reference, let's see, Della Wenman Hartvigsen, who lives up on 13th Avenue, was a car hop over here. So there you go. We've got some local women or girls back at that time. And if you look on this photo, I see a 1957 Ford, a 1957 Mercury. This was the all-new place to be. Now, it wasn't called the Strip at the time, but here we go. We're starting the Coralville dream right here. Wow, and what a place it was. I remember it well. All right. So we're off and running with Lowry's, later to be the Carousel Restaurant. Let's talk. We talked about Dinty's. Now, that's short for Dinsmore, and that was on 5th Street on the south side at where 7th Avenue, right there in those buildings there. Let's talk Club's Steakhouse. Club's Steakhouse was east of the Wagon Wheel, west of the Wagon Wheel. This would be behind Golfzilla, and that was started by Clarence and Imogene Club, and that would be for the steakhouse that I just showed you the clipping of. Now, Clubs later lived on 5th Street up in about the 600 block on the south side, and Mr. Club, Clubby he was called, became an electrician, so I guess he had a lot going for him if he wasn't in the restaurant business. So remember, these are in no particular order, so let's just see what we can come up with here. Kurt Yoakum's restaurant on the Coralville Strip. Kurt Yoakum's restaurant was on the south side of the Coralville Strip, right where Tallgrass or Frohwein's office supply is right now, along in there. The interesting thing was it was just a wonderful restaurant, and Kurt Yoakum was the guy, he was the owner, and I don't know that he was the cook. I'm sure if you're in the restaurant business, you do a little of each one. He had a great big rooftop sign down there, and it showed him with a big chef's hat on, and he had a knife in one hand and a blade on the other hand, like you were sharpening a knife. And it was just a great landmark for the city of Coralville and the restaurant people. So that was Kurt Yoakum's. And Kurt Yoakum's was in business a long time. His son Brant Yoakum later played football at the University of Iowa. Dog and Suds. Oh boy, here we come. Now we're in, the Strip started to get hot in 1957 when Randall's Grocery when the Smitty's Grocery came to town, later Randall's. That's when the Strip kind of started, so we're going to fast forward here a little bit. Remember, no order. Dog and Suds, and Dog and Suds was on the east end of the Strip, kind of along about where, let's see, what's in there, what it would be in the east of Old Chicago, a couple doors, was the Dog and Suds, and the Dog and Suds had the large root beer for 10 cents, and they had the baby root beer. The small root beer was 5 cents, and then the baby root beer, which was just a small one for little bitty kids, was I think it was free if you said you had a child in the car. And they had hot dogs as the name. Dog and Suds, exactly what it means. And they were there for a long time, and you would drive in, and they had the car hop Mostly high school girls worked there. Come over, take your order, and bring it back. And when you were done with your order, you just turned on your lights, and they came and they took your tray, and you put your money there, and away you went. A wonderful restaurant on the Coralville Strip. Just kind of the feeling that you could pull in there, and you always wanted to kind of park up front so everybody could see you were at the Dog and Suds. 10 cents for a large root beer. When they raised that to 15 cents, I was in high school, and we weren't very happy about that. We thought the prices were starting to get out of hand. A&W, now we're talking about A&W on the Coralville Strip. A&W didn't get to Coralville for a long time. And A&W got to Coralville on the Coralville Strip, on the north side of the Coralville Strip. It got flooded in 08, the building did. A&W's been gone a long time. And it was later a CD, a rental place and things like that. Let's see, where would it be right now? It'd be east of Copyworks, a couple doors. It's right about where Sluggers, Monica's is now. Sluggers, I just mentioned one. Where Monica's is now, right along in there, here's where the A&W was. In the family that ran that, they had a wonderful day. I'll give you a nice story about that. They redid the A&W there, and then they brought it into the new corporate look there. And this would have been 71, 72, along in there, 70, 71, the all new improved area like that. So my little brother decided that he needed to go there opening day. So my mom took my brother and a couple of his buddies down there opening day, first day they were open, and my mom proceeded to back into one of their speakers out there because you pulled in and pushed the button and placed your order. So that was opening day for our family. My mom backed into one of the speakers, kind of like a Sonic type thing where you pulled into the booth. But the A&W, as we always call it, air and water. But A&W was so now on the Coralville Strip, at one time we had Dog and Suds and A&W. Randall's Cafe, now wait a minute, Randall's Cafe. Smitty's grocery store later was a Super Value and became Randall's. And as you walked into Smitty's on the east side, there's a Sprint telephone store in there now. In that immediate area right there was the cafe at Randall's. And it was really kind of the early cafe type of thing at what is now, we'll say, Hy-Vee. And a lot of local guys went there in the morning and sat around and shot the breeze and talked about things and this. And they had a little counter and 5 or 6 tables. So it was kind of the first meeting place of that speed in Coralville. Let's talk, since we're in that neighborhood, let's talk Hardee's number 1. Well, Hardee's number 1 was in the same spot that I call Hardee's number 2, only Hardee's number 1, as you know, in 08 flooded. And the new Hardee's number 2, which is there now, is approximately 40 to 50% less size in building size because the estimates are, corporate, that they do about 60% of their business through the drive-up. Now, if you're down there at the new Hardee's, the Hardee's number 2, at the drive-through, notice that when you go through the drive-in, you drive up in the air. That's to accommodate the new floor level based on the flood of 08. Just a little history there for you. Let's go to Henry's. Now, Henry's was also on the Coralville Strip, and Henry's was on the Coralville Strip on the north side of the Coralville Strip, along in about where old Chicago is right now, east of there just a little bit, and it was truly Henry's. Henry's was a copycat knockoff of McDonald's, and I think I have a menu here from Henry's. I'll look and see. Gosh, I don't see it now. Here it is. And it was owned by John and Norma Stacy. And they were very, very active down there. They hired lots and lots of local Coralville kids to work there. And here's the menu from Henry's on the Coralville Strip. And the Henry's menu says 100% pure beef hamburger, 18 cents. It says a deluxe burger was 32 cents. And a fish on a bun was 29 cents. The double cheeseburger was 59 cents. 6-piece chicken, $1.26. And a 15-piece chicken feast was $3.10. And a Pepsi, a Coke, or an orange was 10 cents or 15 cents. And by the way, they had really good French fries, and their French fries were 15 cents. So, you know, the Coralville Strip is really going now in certain times and sometimes together. We had an A&W and we had a Dog and Suds and we had a Henry's, all vying for the restaurant customer on the Coralville Strip. Now, speaking of that, the Coralville Strip was really starting to heat up. So now we did have all these restaurants and some motels along in there. So we were really starting to get some action on the Coralville Strip. Well, now let's talk about Mr. Quick. Now, we had Henry's, we had a restaurant called Mr. Quick, which was just what the word said. It was a hamburger joint, we're going to call it, with all due respect to what it was. And it was located on the Coralville Strip, the north side of the Coralville Strip, where 6th Avenue is. So that would be exactly right across the street from the now long and soon to be missed Sonic. Right across the street from Sonic, on that corner there was a Clark gas station, and right to the east of that was Mr. Quick. And the local manager, Don Kober, ran that operation down there. And Mr. Quick was just a great place to go. And if you will, it was less traffic than a really, really busy place, so you could get in and get out. And one of the things I recall, I have their menu here and too someplace. Once you place your order, they turned around and ordered it. So if you ordered a hamburger and a milk and a fries, they would turn around and say, a single, a grade A, and a box of nails. So they had their own jargon down there, and it was just a fun place to go. That was Mr. Quick. Boy, they did really have good hamburgers and fries down there. Let's talk about the Purple Cow. And I think I'm going to bring in a nice big a picture of the Purple Cow. Thank you. The Purple Cow was on the extreme west end of the Coralville Strip, and right now it's on the Olive Garden corner out there on the west side of 25th Avenue. That was the Purple Cow. And the Purple Cow was actually a dairy farm. It was not in the city limits of Coralville, but it was a dairy farm. And the Myers family decided to, gee whiz, we've got all this milk, we can make product out of that here. And they started to make ice cream, and they had the nicest oak trees out there. This is also the former site of the Coralville Fruit Market, right there. You recall that just a few years ago. So that's where the Purple Cow was, and they had an 18-hole putt-putt golf course, the giant oak trees, and so you could go out there on the hottest day in the summer and be under the shade of those giant air conditioners, those big oak trees, and sit on the picnic tables and play putt-putt golf. It was a big deal to have a birthday party out there, always someone out there having a birthday party. Now, the Coralville kids, that was, if you want to know the truth, that was out of town. So you could either walk out there, walk along the north side of the strip, and or if you rode your bike, which a lot of us did, we rode our bicycles out there, and with the strict rules from your parents, never to cross the Coralville Strip. You never were allowed to go, you had no reason to go to the south side of the strip. So a real icon in Coralville was the Purple Cow. When the Purple Cow closed, they actually moved up to North Liberty, where Hills Bank location is now on 965, and they made it an indoor restaurant. And I'm certainly not their bookkeeper, but it just never had the appeal to the kids like the outdoor one with the putt-putt golf. And they ordered the malts and the fries, and it was just a great place. So the Purple Cow, as you can see the big picture on there, was just a neat restaurant in Coralville's history. Let's talk Ming Gardens. We're back down on the Coralville Strip, and Ming Gardens was on the south side of the Coralville Strip, right about, honestly, where, let's see, there's a Chinese restaurant right there. It's now a sushi place. It is east of Frowine's office building there. And Ming Gardens was tragically lost in a fire, but it was there for many years. And it had on the west side of it, had a large pagoda, just like you would think from China, a large pagoda. And in the back, around the back, was a really nice bar, and it had a little inside the water wheel going and a little bridge you walk over, and it was called the Hung Far Lounge. So Tom Wong, who owned this restaurant in the Ming Gardens, had a wonderful business there and tragically lost in a fire in the early 80s, I believe. And it was a major fire. I was there as a member of the Coralville Fire Department. We spent lots and lots of time down there. We did our very best, but long live the Ming Gardens. Well, let's move around the corner. Let's go over to Judy's. Judy's Hamburgers. Judy's Hamburgers was kind of a knockoff on Wendy's, which was akin to a McDonald's type of thing. And Judy's Hamburgers, just what it was, Judy's Hamburgers sat on 1st Avenue, on the east side of 1st Avenue, just south of Clear Creek. Actually, there's several restaurants there. We'll get into that. So Judy's was there for a short period of time, and Judy's was over there in the late 70s. And Judy's didn't last long over there. That franchise kind of came and gone, and quite honestly, I think they got in legal trouble because it was kind of a knockoff on Wendy's, which was, you know, named after Dave Thomas's daughter, and then these Judy's came to town. It was kind of nondescript hamburgers and fries type of place, and came and went. The highlight probably there was it was a real nice looking building and fresh and clean and things like that. Well, Happy Joe's. Let's talk Happy Joe's. Happy Joe's from Joe Whitty, who down in the Quad Cities came to town many years ago on the Coralville Strip, right along the line there where Monica's is today, just to the east of there, actually, right where the A&W was. And when Happy Joe's came to town, their hotsy-totsy thing was you could go there for a birthday party, and they had a siren, and they'd sing your name, and they'd bring the pizza out, and then everybody would come out and do that. But their big menu item was a pizza with Canadian bacon and pineapple, which no one around here had ever heard of. So that was a big thing for a while. And in all honesty, they only stayed there 2-3 years. I don't know why they left there. It was a great location, and they were always crowded, always did a good business. And Happy Joe's then moved up behind the Coralville truck stop up in that area years later. So Happy Joe's did a fine job there. Still don't know why they moved. They could be there today. Because Coralville still to this day, we do not have a preponderance of pizza places to go sit down. You can get all the carryout you want, but it's not an easy town to go just to a pizzeria. So that was Happy Joe's. The Zesto. The Zesto. The Zesto was at the extreme end of the Coralville Strip. Just don't tell anybody, but it was actually in Iowa City. And it was at the corner of Rocky Shore Drive and the Coralville Strip. So when you went to the Zesto to get an ice cream cone, your instructions were you could ride your bike, instead of going towards the west end to go to the Purple Cow, you went to the east end to the Zesto. And the Zesto, when you got down there, sat about, it was an ice cream store where you walk up to the window, you know, the one side or the other. And it always seems one window was always closed, so you had to go the other. But the Zesto had a nice big sign up on the rooftop, and it was the shape of an ice cream cone, and Z-E-S-T-O, Zesto. And you would go there. The Zesto building sat 4 to 5 feet below the Coralville Strip. 4 to 5 feet below the Coralville Strip, so when you pulled in there, it was a gravel driveway, and you went down. Now, in today's age, we've had a couple floods down there. The Zesto would have been long gone, and it never flooded as far as I know. But when they, of course, redid the strip, why they had to change the elevations. The Zesto closed, no reason why, it just did. Years and years ago, in the 60s, the Zesto came and gone. I should tell you that 4 or 5 years ago, we were on a trip in Missouri, and we saw a Zesto. And I didn't get a chance to pull in there because of the traffic, but it must be some sort of a franchise. Don't know if it's still going anywhere, but we did see a Zesto, and their feature was in Little League back in the 50s here in Coralville. The big thing was if your Little League game, you got to go to the Zesto if your coach would take you there. And the small cone, I think, was a nickel, and the big cone was 10 cents. And of course, when you were a kid, your coach was going to buy you the small cone, and if your folks were there, they upgraded you to the 10-cent cones. The Zesto was a hot deal. Now, let's talk about the Zesto for a minute. Right to the west of it turned out to be the Dog and Suds, but the Dog and Suds was farther to the west, like I noted earlier. And when the land where the Dog and Suds was got sold, they moved the Dog and Suds from where it was down towards Old Chicago up to right next to the Zesto. Aha! It's the little monopoly real estate for you there in Coralville. Now let's stay right in that area and let's go to Lum's. Lum's, and which later became the Coach's Corner. Lum's was built on the site of where the Zesto is now. It's a law firm building there right now, and next door to it is the pizza place down there, the Wig and Pen. That's where all this stuff was. The Zesto, A&W, and along came Lum's. And Lum's was a nice sit-down restaurant, and they had a nice clientele. Remember, that location is about as close as you can get commercial-wise and restaurant-wise to the hospital. So they had a lot of people visiting the hospital and staff, and of course the local people down there. Their claim to fame was, what? Do you recall? Let's think about it for a minute. Their claim to fame was a hot dog steamed in beer and sauerkraut. So don't know where the background was, but that was their big thing. Of course, me being of German descent, I thought that was wonderful. So it was just a great time to go down to Lum's, which later it closed, and the franchise there from the Quad Cities, I saw a couple down there, it became the Coach's Corner. Now, if you think that through, presently there's a restaurant in Iowa City called the Coach's Corner, but this restaurant became the Coach's Corner, and it was kind of a locally owned ma and pa restaurant, and it lasted for a while, and they had pizza and food and things like that, and it never had the sheen on it as the Lums when it was new, but that's what we had down there. Let's move, boy. We're gonna hit something here. Let's go to Coleman's Barbecue Pit. Coleman's Barbecue Pit. Now, Coleman's Barbecue Pit was a lightweight franchise, if you will. It came to town in the mid to late 70s in Coralville, and it was on the Coralville Strip. Notice how half these businesses are on the Coralville Strip at 10th Avenue. So it would be right across the street from we'll say the Coralville American Legion, next to just west of the present-day Coralville Dairy Queen. Dairy Queen number 2. We haven't talked about Dairy Queen number 1. That's Dairy Queen number 2 that's over there right now. That's where Coleman's Barbecue Pit was. And they had a big sign up on the front that it said, I don't know, the world's greatest sandwich or something like that. And you would go in there and you would order your sandwich and your drink, and they would wait on you at the counter. You place your order and you went over and sat down. Well, you know, I've always found it hard in the Midwest, especially maybe in the Coralville area. The barbecue places kind of come and go, and they don't really seem to last too long. So if that's a side order, fine. If it's the main order, it just hasn't proven to be real successful here, and we'll talk about that. Now, I'm going to talk about some pizza things here. Let's see what we come up with on some pizza. Domino's Pizza. Well, that was out on 20th Avenue here in Coralville, on 22nd Avenue in Coralville, out west of Hy-Vee was a Domino's restaurant, delivery. Paul Revere's Pizza. Paul Revere's Pizza was down on 10th Avenue across the street from the post office, and it was a delivery. You could go in there, and they had a couple tables, but their main thing was delivery. Pizza Hut. Now, Pizza Hut was on 1st Avenue. We had a Pizza Hut before Iowa City, so there. Now, we had a Pizza Hut on 1st Avenue in Coralville, which is right now would be south. It was actually next to where the Judy's location was. On the east side of 1st Avenue and is south of Clear Creek. And the Pizza Hut there was there for a long time, built in the early 70s, and they had a nice business down there. You know, a sit-down pizza place was rather new to Coralville. It was the first sit-down pizza place in Coralville. And quite honestly, I really don't know why Pizza Hut's left here. I think I do know why, but the management style and things like that, it never progressed past like the opening day. It was always kind of the same, and more than likely, if you think these things through, sometimes it's location or quality of food, all of the above, cleanliness, and those things probably took a toll on the Pizza Hut. They did have a meeting room downstairs, so I think in '08, had they been there, they'd have been fishing in the basement down there. The Green Pepper. Now, the Green Pepper was on the Coralville Strip, and the Green Pepper was on the north side of the Coralville Strip, right on the Coralville Strip where you go across Clear Creek, right on the northwest corner. Let's see, there's a large building in there now. Wells Fargo Bank is in there. Big, tall building there. That's where the Green Pepper was. The Green Pepper was in a location formerly the home of, you called in your order. We'll talk about that in a minute. Very, very interesting, the building that was in there first. So the Green Pepper came to town, and the Green Pepper, you would go in and get in a line, kind of a buffet type of, so you made your order, and you could get a salad. So you would go in and get yourself a salad, and they would bring your pizza out, and it was the first pizza restaurant in Coralville that I had ever been exposed to a wheat crust pizza. I'd never heard of that, so this is the breakthrough. They also had a really nice salad bar down there. So here came the Green Pepper to Coralville, and it was very, very popular. 1975, 76, 77, long in there, and they took a business that was an old restaurant. I hope I come back to that one. Let's talk Blue Moon as long as we're at it. The Blue Moon. Now, the Blue Moon sounds like Blue Moon actually had food and was a beer hall too. And the Blue Moon came here. Right now it's called Flanagan's. Down in the Iowa River Power Building, there was the restaurant called Blue Moon, and they had dances in there, but you could also eat, and of course you know Flanagan's is open today. King's Food Host. King's Food Host. There was one in Coralville and one in Iowa City, and the one in Coralville was on the site of the Green Pepper, what we just talked about, on the north side of the Strip at the corner of 4th Avenue there, where Wells Fargo is, right to the east of Randy's Carpets. That was built as a King's Food Host, and it had all the corporate look. It had the red/pink canopies around the side. when you walked into King's Food Host, their concept was this. You walk into King's Food Host, and they had a greeter who would come. Dorothy Cannon actually was the greeter down there. She would, at times, she would come and a table for 2 or 3. You would go over and get a little booth, and they had the plastic flowers between the booths so you didn't rub shoulders with the people next to you. And they had the menu right there, and you would pick up the telephone when you were ready, and you would call in your order. And in the back there, usually the person would pick up kind of the old operator type thing, had a headset on and would pick up your the phone from your order. Table 19, we want this, we want that. And one of the most favorite items I had was called a cheese Frenchie. And it was a cheese sandwich, the old, just a regular old cheese sandwich, and then they deep fried it. So see, the American palate has always been, let's deep fry that sucker. Let's see what we can do. So that was their big thing. And then they had one in Iowa City down on the Highway 6 bypass, along in where Hills Bank is now on the north, on that southeast corner down there. So King's Food Hosts are out of Omaha. I don't know if they're still around or not. They came to Coralville. Why they left? Again, their business model or something took place down there. So the Greenbrier. Now wait a minute, we talked Green Prepper. Where's the Greenbrier? The Greenbrier moved in on the Coralville Strip where the Carousel restaurant later was, which was earlier the home of Lowry's. That became the Greenbrier. The Greenbrier came to town, and they decided to do a darker motif. They went with some exposed stone inside and out, dark exposed rafters and bookshelves, and kind of a heavy feeling in there at the Greenbrier, trying to emulate maybe a little upper crusty type thing. And they were there for a while, and it was a nice location down there. The Greenbrier was owned by some local friends of ours. They did a nice job down there, but concepts change, times change, and things like that again. The Hungry Hobo. Now, that's not too distant far back, but the thing about the restaurants, if you don't write them down, pretty soon you forget they were even here. And the Hungry Hobo was down in Riverview Square in Coralville, where Brugger's is right now. It was about 3 or 4 doors west of Brugger's, right in the mall down there. And it was just what it says. It was a hobo sandwich. To this day, they're still in business in Iowa City on South Riverside Drive under a different name. Timmy Flynn's Hobo place, I think it is what it is now. He was a proprietor at the Hobo in Coralville, and they've been gone 4 or 5 years by now. Dairy Queen and Maid-Rite. Let's call this Dairy Queen number 1. And Dairy Queen number 1 was down at on First Avenue, off First Avenue, and it was west of First Avenue. It was basically behind where Hardee's is now. Now there's a laundromat in there, and you can go down there right now. There's a sandwich place right on the end of that little mall, and on the far end of that mall is Dave's Barbershop. But right out in the parking lot in front of Dave's Barbershop area down there was 2 restaurants. It was a Maid-Rite. It was a long, skinny Maid-Rite building with just booths only. When you went in, you had to walk up 3 or 4 steps, and then you sat at stools. Then it was a Maid-Rite, the Maid-Rite franchise, the loose meat sandwich, and it was a kind of a coffee shop, Maid-Rite type of place. And at the west end of that, they had a little bitty Dairy Queen franchise. So if you wanted a nice cream cone, you went down there to Dairy Queen and you stood there, made your order, and the guys who were making the hamburgers came over and made you them all. And I would say to you that to the public, it didn't appear to be the cleanest place, and it went downhill from there. But they sure tried while they were there. Dairy Queen Maid-Rite combination type thing. The concession stand at the Coralville Drive-In Theater. Now, I'm going to do a show about the Coralville Drive-In Theater, but the Coralville Drive-In Theater was on the site of what is now right at the site of the Coralville Public Library. And it kind of leaked both ways, where the all-new building is for the Coralville Center for the Performing Arts. That was part of the Coralville Drive-In Theater. They later sold that end of it off to Carol Ann Apartments, and they kept the Drive-In Theater. So right where the Coralville Library is, that was the Coralville Drive-In Theater. The concession stand, like any drive-in, as you watched the show, they would come up, they'd take a break, and 10 minutes till showtime, and they'd have popcorn on the screen, and 6 minutes till showtime. And I think there was about 4 minutes between each minute. Had the countdown to make sure you had plenty of time. And when you walked in that restaurant down there, it was a one-level little building, and you even walked down a couple steps down there, and through a screen door in the summer. And a hot dog was, I don't know, $2 back then, which was pretty expensive, but that's what movie food is. And I know lots of my local friends worked there at the Coralville Drive-In Theater, and it was there from 1952 to about 1982. So it was an icon in Coralville, and if you grew up in Coralville back in that period of time, you always went to the drive-in, and you always went into the concession stand. Just not particularly a real restaurant, but they sold food. How about the Dairy Suite? Well, actually, the Dairy Suite was on 10th Avenue. I have to be honest with you, that was my wife and I ran that for 3 years, 1977, 78, and 79, and we call it the Dairy Sweat. Because we worked there all the time in the summer. I worked there in the evenings after showing houses in the real estate business all day. My wife worked there all day and half the night at the Dairy Suite, and we did it. Then we built that because the kids of Coralville had to ride their bikes across the strip to go to a competing restaurant, ice cream restaurant, and we thought that we could cut them off the pass, which we did. And for 3 years, quite frankly, we couldn't take it anymore. In the summer, we just worked ourselves ragged. And a wonderful place, nice business. We sold it to some people who later put a little miniature golf course in there, as you recall. And so it was on the Coralville scene starting in 1977 and just left here 3-4 years ago. So that was the Dairy Suite, and we miss our little Dairy Suite. We had a lot of fun down there, and it was just kind of in the evenings, kind of the fun place to be, the in place to be for while you got your cone and your malt and things like that. La Fiesta. Now, wait a minute, La Fiesta. Mexican food, yes, Mexican food. La Fiesta was on First Avenue. La Fiesta took over after Judy's left. So La Fiesta was down on First Avenue on the east side and just south of Clear Creek. And La Fiesta was just what it said. It had a Mexican food down there. And they had great salads. The first time I think I ever had a Mexican type of salad. We had all kind of beans and all the standard stuff they had. That was their big menu item. So La Fiesta didn't last long, but it was a nice location down there. So speaking of the laws, let's go to La Auberge, or we call it La Auberge. You know, us Midwesterner, we can really butcher up the old French language. And La Auberge was on L'Auberge, not being French. It was over on 2nd Avenue Place. Now, if you know where Burger King is right now, as you look to the south out Burger King, it was right across the street. It's actually in Roger Fairchild and Billy Fairchild's old house. They turned it into a restaurant. And they did serve French food in there and pastries and things like that. So we have had culture in Coralville. It hasn't all been hamburgers over the years. So we did have that. We had a restaurant and a pastry and a little bakery called First on 5th. And First on 5th would be First on 5th Street. And it was down in the 100 block of 5th Street across from Kosher Store. If you go down there now, we're talking about as a landmark the Riverview Square Mall down there, and Golfzilla. It was to the east of that, the Wagon Wheel Tavern. Oh boy, great cheeseburgers at the Wagon Wheel Tavern. It started in 1933, and the Wagon Wheel stayed there until the early 80s, late 80s when it moved up. It's now the Nickelodeon on the Coralville Strip. What a wonderful story that was down at the Wagon Wheel. So the First on 5th sat in the building to the east of that. And there were other restaurants in there too. We'll talk about that soon. And we talked about Dairy Queen number 1. Let's talk Rodrigo's. Rodrigo's Pizza. Now, the pizza was undescribable because it was just pizza. And lots of people this would have been in the early 60s, early 60s, was Rodrigo's, was east, right along in there on where First on 5th was, in east of Golfzilla. There was a building out there. A lot of people tried things, and some other restaurants have been in there. That was Rodrigo's. Now, Rodrigo's was named after Rodney Bidlack. Now, Rodney Bidlack in Coralville history had 2 important jobs. Number 1, in the late 50s, he was elected mayor of the city of Coralville. He and his family lived over on 10th Avenue. So Rodney Bidlack was the mayor. He drove a pink Cadillac, by the way. And later on, he was also the manager at the Coralville Drive-In. So 2 of the finest places in the world, Rodrigo's, we'll say, and the Coralville Drive-In Theater. Rodney Bidlack had his sights set on both of those. So now in that same building where Rodrigo's was, in 1962, 1961, Sparky Garinger, the Garinger family, opened a restaurant called Sparky's Lunchtime Cafe. And again, this is where right along in there where the steakhouse was, where Rodrigo's was, where La Auberge was at one time. Earlier was the Sparky's Lunchtime Cafe. Now, I was in the Coralville Junior High back then, which is now Coralville Central Elementary, but we had the elementary and we had the junior high there at the same time. And so a couple of the Garinger, 3 of the Garinger boys were on the team, and they came one time with the little slips, invoices, the restaurant little tickets, and the football team, we all got to go down to Sparky's Lunchtime Cafe, and I remember it well. It was for a hamburger, a Coke, and a French fries, and it was 90 cents. So right there, they were probably underpriced, but that was just life back then. So the football team, we all went down there, 2 or 3 of us at a time, or 5 or 6 at a time, and we enjoyed that. And the business changed, the climate changed, and Sparky's was there for 2 years, and Mr. Garinger was a nice guy. Coral Lanes and Restaurant. Now, you know, Coral Lanes just left us in 2008 after the flood. And back in the day, that business opened up after the war. And when I was a kid in the 50s down there, they did not have automatic pin setters. So when we would go down there to watch people bowl, which was kind of a big deal back then, watch people bowl, when you would bowl a line, and then they had the board set up, and boys would jump down there and clean out the pins that had been knocked down, and they would then set the other ones back up on the spot they were supposed to be if they wobbled around. And Bill Dinsmore and Bill Scriver and all kinds of local people who you might know worked as pin boys down there. And they also had a restaurant down there. They had a lunch counter, if you will. And at that lunch counter in Coralville Bowling Alley, they always had the best hamburgers, and they had great chocolate malts. So my dad, when he'd get stuck babysitting with me when I was a kid, about Cub Scout age, he'd just take me down there to watch him bowl, and we'd eat down there. It was his idea of probably shutting me up, but it sure worked because I really liked to go there. And over the years when I bowled down there, it was just a nice place to go and have a Coke and meet people. Let's talk about Ron Amici's Pumpernickel. Ron Amici's Pumpernickel was on 1st Avenue, right down by the railroad trestle on 1st Avenue, Mormon-Trek Boulevard. That was a Pumpernickel number 2, and Pumpernickel number 1 was over on the Coralville Strip, south side of the Coralville Strip, at the Iowa Land Lodge, in the office part of the Iowa Land Lodge. That was Amici's Pumpernickel number 1, and after a few years, that would have been in the late 70s, that Ron Amici, the late Ron Amici, was in there, and then later on, several years later, he moved over to Pumpernickel number 2, which today is a Mexican restaurant, as you know, right north of the underpass on 1st Avenue of the old Rock Island line there. Donut Land. Now, Donut Land was on the Coralville Strip, and they came to Coralville in about 1964, 1965, with kind of a goofy design. It was orange and white, and it kind of came to a point out front and had a raised roof. It was nothing more than an eye catcher. That's how they built a lot of those places, the commercial places for restaurants back then. They've been regulated since then in some cities about the look you can have, fortunately or unfortunately, how you see that. But the Donut Land came to town, and the Donut Land always had a little sign there, and it said donuts, and it said, and good coffee too. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but I can tell you lots and lots of people went to Donut Land and drank coffee. And it was kind of a little lunch counter, had booths in there, had the little countertop stools in there. And Donut Land was very successful here in town. And they stayed and stayed and stayed. And the thing that bothered the donut business was the invention of the fact that people, though it's full of sugar and carbs, nobody really cared until they came out with a health kick. And you don't want to eat donuts, you want to have bagels. So the bagel industry was and has been very hard on the donut industry, and that kind of caused the demise of Donut Land down there. Nice location on the Coralville Strip, just east of Old Chicago, along in there. Again, there have been more than one location for all these restaurants, but that's a pretty hot location down there on the Coralville Strip. Ah, yes, the Skell Diner. Now, this is one of the Coralville icons. The Skell Diner, later the Hawkeye Feed and Relay. The Skell Diner was part of the Skelly Truck Stop, which was opened in 1966, and that was up on 1st Avenue, Hayden Freeway at the interstate. Right now it's a vacant lot, but it was the truck stop. We all know where the truck stop was. And that was owned by Richard Dick Myers and his wife Doris. And they opened that against the best wishes of their banker because the interstate wasn't entirely done and 1st Avenue wasn't paved clear out there yet. But they went out there, opened the truck stop, and opened Skell Diner. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, if you either grew up around here or were in college around here or in business back then, when the day was done or the evening was done and you wanted to go somewhere, you had it, you'd been to a movie, where did you go? You went to Skell Diner. And Skell Diner was a great meeting place, and the truckers were in there, and the local yokels were in there because Dick Myers and Doris were in there. The Skell Diner became an icon, and the Skell Diner was just a wonderful place to go. I'm thinking maybe it wasn't the Lark level food, but it was the Skell Diner and a cup of coffee and a hamburger, and just a great place to go. Later became the Hawkeye Feed and Relay. We had a closing. When that business closed, on behalf of the Iowa City Coralville Chamber of Commerce, we had an official business closing up there. That was so important to the community. And we'll do that. Park Avenue Barbecue. Now, Park Avenue, first of all, there's no Park Avenue in Coralville, but that was the name of the restaurant. It was on First Avenue in Coralville, which was earlier a country kitchen. We'll get two for the price of one here. It was built as a country kitchen, and an interesting thing about the country kitchen franchise, I think the last one finally closed. They changed the name in Cedar Rapids, I think. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but the country kitchens kind of came and went as a franchise around the Midwest. Their corporate rule said any country kitchen south of Interstate 80 was their demarcation line, didn't get the full insulation package. So if you went down to a country kitchen down there, it was cold sitting next to those windows down there because they didn't get the insulated windows because that was their corporate thing. And we were at, 100 yards, 200 yards south of Interstate 80 there. So the country kitchen became a great go-to place. In the morning, my dad went down there, and whenever they opened the doors at 0500 or 0600, he and his old buddies were in there having coffee and solving the world's problems. Maybe you were down there too, in the booths at the country kitchen, and lots of local people worked there, and it was a great spot. And by the way, if you're keeping score at home, if you want to write some names of restaurants down and get them to me in case I miss them, I'd like to have you do that because we're trying to get as complete list as we have. And you can call me. My name's Rex Brandstatter. You can call me on this line. You can call me at 330-5534, 330-5534. And or you can send the names to my email. You can send the names to my email, which is rex@rexrb.com. That would be rex@rexrb as in boy.com. Say, hey, do you remember this or do you remember that? Give me a name of a restaurant, or say, I had a lot of fun at the A&W. Let me know these things because this is Coralville history, ladies and gentlemen, and it's fun, and we'd like to have you be a part of it as much as we possibly can. So Park Avenue Barbecue came to town, and Park Avenue Barbecue was just what it said, another barbecue place in the location of what was the country kitchen. And they started off, they had a logo or a mascot, which was a pig, a hog, and they had kind of an apron on and a fancy red, white, and checkered top or something like that. And the proprietor of the place put that suit on one day and walked the Coralville 4th of July parade. And it would be like being in Herky the Hawk get up, and it was really hot, and we were in the front yard of a house on 14th Avenue, and we asked the pig if he needed a pop, and quite honestly, he said, no, I need a beer. So we took the head off, and man, that guy was superheated. The Park Avenue Barbecue was a wonderful place to go. Didn't last long. Maybe it was the concept, I don't know, but the barbecue has been a tough go, but it was just a nice place as long as it lasted. Mr. Steak. Now, Mr. Steak was a franchise. Mr. Steak was on the Coralville Strip, and Mr. Steak was on the north side of the Coralville Strip, just west of Randall's grocery store there, across the street from Frohwein Office Supply. And it was there for a long, long time. Bob Dotson and his wife Bobby ran Mr. Steak, and it was exactly what it said. It was a lunchtime place to go, and they served a different kind of a menu, mostly beef menus and hamburgers and strip steaks and things like that. In Mr. Steak, you could see people at Mr. Steak for lunch, go back there that evening, and they were the same people, and now they're going to have supper there. So very popular place. I remember seeing lots and lots of university staff in there, coaches and things like that. It was just a nice, clean operation at Mr. Steak. Roughly right now where Monica's is, long in there. Not roughly, it's where Monica's is, okay? Sluggers. Sluggers, but Rex, that's down there now. No, Sluggers is gone. So is the big sign out front. That too is on the location of what is now Monica's. And Sluggers came to town, and it opened in about 1988, 89, and the Strip, by this time, the Strip needed some new blood, needed some new concepts, a new look. Some younger owners were in the fold now, not the corporate thing, it was locally owned. And Sluggers, as you know, lasted a long, long time down there. Came time for them to face the flood in 08, and they had to make a decision. Do we go back in and clean up this building and redo what we've been doing, or make a new new effort at it, or what do we do? And they decided not to go back in there, and the ownership team there went out to North Liberty, what is now Red's Ale House, a very popular location in North Liberty, But that's where, on this location, that's where Sluggers was, and Sluggers made a good run down there for as long as they were there. Paul's Heroes. Now, I'm going to Wayback Machine here. Paul's Heroes, I think, was the first sub shop in Coralville. And Paul's Heroes was the late 1970s. This is too good. It was in the old Coralville Bank building. Coralville Bank, which opened up in the late 50s, where Hills Bank is now. In their east parking lot, there's the ATM machine in there right now. That's actually where the Coralville Bank was. And when the Coralville Bank left and moved next door into the Unibank, where Hills Bank is now, became Unibank, UNI Bank, Unibank. They left the old building there for a while as a rental. And Paul's Heroes moved in there. And ladies and gentlemen, their feature sandwich was a baked bean sub. Now, I'm not sure the baked bean sub was ever going to catch on, and guess what? It didn't. But the neat thing about it, you could go into the bank and you walk up to the teller where you used to do your banking, and they would take your order, and you could actually drive through, and they'd send your sandwich out in the bank thing where you used to pick up your make your deposits. So, the Wagon Wheel. Now, the Wagon Wheel Tavern was actually started by the Dinsmore family, again, way down there on 5th Street, where Golfzilla is, right along in there. And the Wagon Wheel Tavern started in the 1930s and left down there in the 80s. And it was owned by the Dinsmores for a long, long time. And then it actually was sold earlier to Kenny Moore, and Kenny Moore ran it for long, long time, through the 50s and into the 60s and into the 70s. And the Wagon Wheel was the iconic tavern, the small town tavern in a building that was less than structurally sound, we'll say. And it was the place that you went, the mindset of the men in the town mostly was to stop in there for one after work. And that's really, really what it was. The clink, clink, clink in the summertime in that neighborhood meant that mostly the men were down there throwing horseshoes on the west side of the building. And they would set a beer up on, they had the windows that opened up, kind of awning type thing, and they just set the beer on the windowsill there and clink, clink, clink that. When I was a kid, my dad took me down there as a young man, a young boy, and there was no social outrage with that because it was a social thing. It wasn't down there to see how many beers you could drink. That wasn't the deal for the men at that time. It was an after-work type thing. It was after the war, and the Wagon Wheel was the gathering point, along with Kosher Store across the street, for the men of Coralville after the war. And I can tell you that I sat at the counter down there, and my dad would have a beer, and the bartender would say, "We have, young man, we have orange beer, we have root beer, we have grape beer, what would you like?" And I'd always get orange or something. That's the way they treated it. It was total respect in there. And they did have a restaurant, and they did have great tenderloins, as you might expect. They had great hamburgers, and the Coralville Fire Department, they had oyster stew. The Coralville Fire Department, we had our fireman ball down there and our annual dinner type of thing. And they didn't have the fireman ball, they had annual dinner down there, and it was a great time. It was just a little kind of crammed in there, but the Wagon Wheel, truly Coralville icon. Mekong, let's talk Mekong. Oh, wait a minute, Mekong was on 1st Avenue, just north of Clear Creek on the west side there, and that's where Bowers Appliance used to be. That's where the Coralville Courier and Courier Printing and Copying used to be. That was Mekong later in life. It's been 2 or 3 other things we'll talk about. And the Mekong was a Asian restaurant of some descript, and actually it was good. And he would go by there usually on Sundays. They had a big crowd. They had a nice crowd in there, and during the week they did have a lunch crowd in there. So here we came with an Asian restaurant. Dickey's Barbecue, in my opinion, Dickey's Barbecue, the fastest in and out, here today, gone tomorrow restaurant in Coralville. Where was Dickey's Barbecue? In case you missed it, well, it was out across north of Interstate 80. North side of Coral Ridge Mall, in that big shopping center across the Interstate 80, due north of Coral Ridge Mall. And Dickey's Barbecue, I think it lasted 60 days, 2 months. And I saw them around town with a nice little car with a Dickey's Barbecue logo, all painted on everything. And lo and behold, not that much longer, away they went, they were gone. Gee whiz, another barbecue place. So my theory on barbecue, I hope it doesn't hold true for a couple of them here now, but it's just been a tough go for when barbecue is the main selection. Boy, this is going to be hard to remember this. The Parthenon. The Parthenon. I want to come back to the Parthenon. The Travelodge Pancake House. The Travelodge Pancake House. How about this? How about the Congress Inn? Does that ring a bell? Well, in the 60s, early 60s, the Congress Inn was built, on Highway 6 just west of Clear Creek, south side of the Strip, immediately west of Clear Creek. Right now, today, you can still tell that it was a motel, and this is where Amici's place was in the building out front. It was called the Congress Inn Hotel and Pancake House, and later it became the Travel Lodge. Now, it was real popular, and the Pancake House, we'd never had a true pancake place here in town. So on the Sunday mornings after church, things like that, that place was wall-to-wall, big line down there. Well, after the Travel Lodge itself, the Congress Inn became the Travel Lodge, a big franchise, and the Travel Lodge didn't make it either in that location. Think about that location today. It's just a hard place to get in and get out of. But motels and hotels wanted to be on the Coralville Strip because that was the main drag. This was before, right at about the time the interstate came in. But remember, when the interstate came here, there was no traffic out there. Coralville wasn't even out to the interstate yet, so it was a tough go. The Travel Lodge Pancake House was the Congress Inn and then the Travel Lodge, and later became the Parthenon. What was the Parthenon? Well, a young guy and his wife decided to open that up, and so they went out on the front and they put bigger colonnades out front, and the Parthenon became sort of a Greek type of thing. It wasn't exactly just Greek food, but inside they had statues of Mercury and Zeus and all those Greek people in the past. So it was kind of a new, novel place to be in Coralville, the Parthenon. KFC on First Avenue. KFC, which was next to McDonald's. Now, McDonald's, I was in on the real estate deal many, many years ago when McDonald's came to town, and they chose a site there, and the old McDonald's got torn down, and now there's a new McDonald's on that site. Well, KFC was right to the north there. Now, the KFC people are the same people, the Grassi family, that owned a different restaurant here in Coralville. We'll see about that. Bonanza. You bet. Not just a cowboy show on TV. Bonanza was a steakhouse chain, and they came to town. Bonanza came to town. Bonanza came to town in the in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm going to say the Bonanza came to town, and they were on the Coralville Strip where Frohwein's Office Supply is, right along in there. There's a Chinese place there now. That is the actual building that Bonanza was in, and Bonanza was a place where you went for lunch and/or supper. And they had a salad bar, and you chose the style of steak you want, the cut of steak you want, and it was, they're still around today in certain areas, but they're not here. And it was a popular place on the Coralville Strip. Ponderosa, well, right up the street on the Ponderosa on the Coralville Strip, again on the south side of the Coralville Strip, roughly where Sluggers is now. And as a matter of fact, it's in the building where Mondo's is. That was called Ponderosa, and that was Ponderosa Steakhouse. Again, kind of a if you will, kind of a low-end steakhouse with a salad bar type thing. It was popular, and when they first opened, they had like picnic tables and benches, and they upgraded that and put in some chairs and things like that. It had kind of a lodge look when they first started. Ponderosa, Ponderosa pine type of thing, and they lasted quite a while. And again, that motif, that business style didn't really last long here in this area. All right. If you think you're on top of this stuff, Nugent's Chuck Wagon. Nugent's Chuck Wagon. Now, Nugent's Chuck Wagon was on the Coralville Strip, and it was west on the Coralville Strip. Nugent's Chuck Wagon is right where Ace Hardware, Lennox and Cedic is right now, in the west building that faces north and south. That was Nugent's Chuck Wagon. Also the home of the Hawk Ballroom when it moved out there. Boy, now I got you going. That was Nugent's Chuck Wagon. They came from Iowa City. The owners of it had a restaurant downtown in Iowa City and moved to Coralville. So what was the name of the restaurant downtown Iowa City? Robert's Smorgasbord. All right. The Congress Inn and Pancake House, we talked about that. Babs, B-A-B-B-S. Babs Restaurant on the Coralville Strip, where the Sleep Source is right now on the Coralville Strip, across the street from Copyworks. That was Babs. Now, Babs was actually started as Babs was downstairs. Babs was started by Tom Babb, was his name, and it started as a new home of the Coralville American Legion, but they had food down there. And it was truly a Coralville restaurant. Not a well-known one, but Babb, mostly people went there to drink, but they did have food. Okay, all right. Country Dough. Now, Country Dough was a nice little bakery on 5th Street. 5th Street, right west of City Hall here in Coralville. We go right around the bend just west of the duck pond. There is a building there today, and a Country Dough was in there. And a man and his wife started that because the lady who operated that had some great recipes that she baked at home a lot, and it was really good. So she started there, and it was just hard to get in and get out of there, and it was kind of a diminutive type size, and I don't think the advertising budget was there. So it lasted a year and a half, and then Country Dough was gone. Quite honestly, folks, they had the biggest and the best cinnamon rolls in town. If you on one part of me says I'm glad they're closed because I was eating too many of them, and the other one says I wish they were open because I'd like to have one today. They had the ham biscuit. Oh, I can't get started. The Royal Coachman Restaurant. Royal Coachman Restaurant. Now, the Royal Coachman Restaurant was inside the building which was first built as the Holiday Inn, and that's out on Highway 965 on the northeast corner of 965, which is now today, let's see, there's a Mustang Market on the corner, and then you go around the corner, there's 2 new buildings there. They tore this building down, and that's where the Royal Coachman Restaurant was. The Royal Coachman came in after the Holiday Inn had left. The Holiday Inn actually had a restaurant out there too. C&D Grocery ice cream window. Now, C&D Grocery, I'm going to guarantee you that not many people out there remember the C&D Grocery. That was Clay and Dorothy, Clay and Dorothy Russell with a D, and it was on 5th Street at 8th Avenue. And the building is now gone, but it was 5th Street at 8th Avenue, and it was a little building down there. And on one side was the little grocery store, and actually you could go to the window, get an ice cream cone. We could get a bottle of pop, not a can, a bottle of pop, and they sold Canada Dry pop, and the bottle came up, and then it got big, and then it came to a point. So we loved going down there, and pop was 10 cents, and they had the ice cream. C&D Grocery, and had an ice cream window down there. The Malt Shop. I'm in that same neighborhood. Let's go to the Malt Shop. Let's go east from C&D Grocery. Let's go around 5th Street to where 7th Avenue is. 7th Avenue there, where the steakhouse was, where Dinty Steakhouse was. And let's stop right in there. A man named Reggie Eckhoff in 1962-63 in one of his buildings down there. There were apartments, and there was other business there on the main floor. He opened a malt shop. Hallelujah. The kids in Coralville, we had a place we could walk to and ride our bikes to, a nice clean fun. They had a pinball machine in there, and my dad warned me about pinball, and it would eat your money. And he was right. It took my paper out money. I was a kid. What did we care? It was just nice, clean fun. Had malts, and I think you could get a hamburger in there and a Coke and stuff like that. The malt shop lasted a couple years. Here's one for you. A.G. Brown's, or it was on the sign, it said Antonio Garcia Brown. And someone dissected that name for me one time as Antonio Garcia. It was Mexican, and Brown was more of an American, so it was like Mexican and American food. And it was called A.G. Brown's on the Coralville Strip. A.G. Brown's on the Coralville Strip, north side of the Strip, which on the location of which was once Happy Joe's, which is now long in there where, what's in there now? East of Copy Works there. East of where Monica's is, that was A.G. Brown's. Rastrelli's. Now, Rastrelli's was an Italian restaurant in the same location as A.G. Brown's on the Coralville Strip. And Rastrelli's was a, if I recall, just what I said, kind of an Italian place. And there are other Rastrelli's around. I know there are some in Chicago. So apparently someone put together a franchise. And Rastrelli's was just kind of getting going. It was a nice place to go, as was A.G. Brown's. And then the concept changed, the management changed, whatever, and away they went. Mark's Big Boy. Now, Mark's Big Boy was up on 1st Avenue, presently the home of the Convention Center, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, 900 1st Avenue. That was built as a Mark's Big Boy. And Mark's Big Boy, this particular location, franchisee, was out of Milwaukee. And Mark's Big Boy later became a Country Kitchen. Country Kitchen moved up the street from there for a bigger location to be the first pole position for people coming in from the Interstate 80. So it's kind of a hot area down there, as you know, right now. It still is. And so that's where Mark's Big Boy. Mark's Big Boy was there for a long time until they called a local realtor to sell it, and the deal was put together, and that's where the Visitors Bureau is today. J.C.'s Restaurant. J.C., the letter J.C. Restaurant. J.C. Restaurant was down in the location of the Mekong. The Mekong Restaurant down on 5th Street, right north of Clear Creek. And that was in the old building that was built by Virgil Bowers for Bowers Appliance Store. Later, the Coralville Courier business, been lots of different things in there. And it was J.C.'s Restaurant. J.C.'s Restaurant then moved down on South Gilbert Street and had a nice little crowd. Had kind of the bicycle crowd and kind of who went there. Had a nice group. Cherry's Barbecue Pit. Cherry's Barbecue Pit. Owned by the Cherry Home family, therefore the name Cherry's Barbecue Pit. And it was right there where J.C.'s Restaurant was, which is where Mekong was. So see, you can kind of remanufacture the building in the restaurant business, if you will. You have to be careful when you go back in behind somebody who wasn't successful. It's kind of hard to overcome some of those things. Well, Cherry's Barbecue Pit really had excellent barbecue, and had all different kinds of menu items that you could sit in and or carry out. Again, it kind of died under its own weight due to the fact that it was only barbecue. Ladies and gentlemen, this is too good. I know I've got your brains going and thinking and wondering about these things. Don't forget to write some of these down. If you have some really good experiences about working at some of these places, I'd like to know about them. We talked about Made Right number 2, and we didn't talk about Made Right number 2. Made Right number 2 was on the Coralville Strip, and it hasn't been gone all that long, and it's over there where Sparty's Gyros is on the Coralville Strip, along in there, which was also another restaurant we'll get to in just a minute here. And the Made Right number 2 came in under the all-new Made Right flag. The franchise had been recabubulated. It was all new and shiny, and they didn't last long. And they got in there, and things had kind of changed. It was no longer ma and pa and slap on a Made Right to you. It was measured out, and they would take it the exact 3.2 ounces, put it in the microwave and heat it to you. It just didn't have the homey ma and pa feel that most Made Rights have, and did not last very long. And right now, Sparty's Gyros is in there, and maybe more to come. Well, that's the same location, ladies and gentlemen, of another restaurant that was really close by there, Long John Silver's. And Long John Silver's came to the Coralville Strip, I believe, in the late 70s. And Long John Silver's had a fire and left a few short years ago. And in my real estate company, I get more calls about when are we going to get a Long John Silver? Is Long John Silver's ever going to come back to Coralville? And I really can't answer the question to this day. People drive to Cedar Rapids. I believe there's at least one up there, I know, maybe two. Long John Silver's in Cedar Rapids, and this one is as missed as any restaurant that Coralville's ever had. Long John Silver's on the Coralville Strip. Now, if you think I stumped you before, I've got another one for you. Hillman's Log Cabin Barbecue. Hillman's Log Cabin Barbecue. And Hillman's Log Cabin Barbecue on the north side of the Coralville Strip, on the site of the old Hudson gas station. I know I got you there. Site of the which is east of Old Chicago on the flat down in there. Hillman's Barbecue. And toward the back of that lot, they had kind of a little log cabin, just what it said. It was a group out of the Quad Cities came here, and kind of a small feeling in there, kind of smoky in there. They smoked their own bar. It was a real deal. And not that the rest of them aren't. This thing was the real deal down there early in the game. And they had great log cabin feel. And the barbecue, and you sat kind of on split log cabin benches in there and tables. And it just didn't last long. It was just that thing. The Treehouse Lounge with bar food. Now, the Treehouse Lounge on the Coralville Strip was built as the Sunset Motel. And they had an addition that it was a second story addition, and hung out over the parking lot. And if you walked up the outside steps or in through the hallway, it was a Treehouse Lounge, and they had minor bar food in there. But it was a great place to go to listen to Charlie play the piano, and then they did have some bar food in there. We're on that same area. We're going to talk about the famous Dill Burger. And the famous Dill Burger came to town on the Coralville Strip. The famous Dill Burger took over after Burger King number 1 left. Wait a minute, there was already a Burger King in Coralville on First Avenue. The Burger King on First Avenue was down on the Coralville Strip where the Dill Burger ended up. So it was Burger King came to town. The Burger King bought the land from another restaurant. I might be able to think of that name shortly. Burger King came to town, bought the site of a former restaurant, built the Burger King building on the far west half of the lot, and they used the rest of the lot for parking. Well, Burger King did an average job in there, and when they left, the Dill Burger came in, and the Dill Burger came into town. They had an all-new recipe for a hamburger. Think of the name, Dill Burger. They used a lot of dill flavoring in there, and became, if you will, kind of a drier hamburger than the rest. And they did a pretty good job, but it was no longer a franchise. It was more of a local franchise from out of town type of thing. They did last a long time, but they really never did the business that the rest of them did. the Big Ten restaurant. Now, there used to be a Big Ten restaurant in Iowa City down on South Riverside Drive, but we had our own Big Ten restaurant. And the Big Ten restaurant was up on about East 9th Street, back behind the truck stop up there. And that was the home of the Red Stallion at one point, which I don't ever recall being in. And the Big Ten restaurant was up there, and the waitresses and waiters had referee shirts on. It was kind of a sports athletic motif down there. Taco Bell. Who can forget that we had a Taco Bell? We had a Taco Bell on First Avenue, right south of Clear Creek, which is also, if you recall, that's where Judy's was. That's where La Fiesta was. Right there was a Taco Bell. It was right next to the Pizza Hut. They took the Pizza Hut down and built a Taco Bell, and we really had something going. And then the Taco Bell, kind of some issues down there with ingress and egress. And I don't exactly remember when it left, but I think it left in the flood of '08. And the Taco Bell, they have been looking around Coral kicking tires, but they're not here today. The Cottage. Oh, wait a minute, the Cottage. Where was the Cottage? The Cottage actually came from Iowa City, and the Cottage Bakery is in Iowa City now. The former owner of that started the Cottage restaurant here in Coralville on 10th Avenue in the old Farm Bureau building, which was right next to my old Dairy Suite on 5th Street, still there, or on 10th Avenue, is still there today as a Chinese restaurant. Sonic. This list is hot, ladies and gentlemen. Sonic has only been gone. Sonic was on the Coralville Strip. You see most Sonics south of the Mason-Dixon line, where it's warmer in the winter, because Sonic has no indoor seating. And everybody always said to me, what are they going to do in the winter? Well, we found out they didn't do anything in the winter. And the people the franchisees closed to 3 of those Sonics, and it's not closed for a season. It's closed. So go down, like I've done, get your pictures. The Old Country Buffet. Now this is almost hot stuff. The Old Country Buffet was in Coral Ridge Mall, and they left. I don't know the business books out there, none of my business, but apparently it wasn't turning the dollar. That's another reason you close your business, because of the dollar. The Edge. We lost the Edge not long ago. The Edge right now is where Bandana's barbecue place is. I've been in there. I hope they hang in there. I think they're doing fine. What do I know? But that's where it is now. The Edge was down there on First Avenue, and it came from Iowa City, and as a different business model, RT Grunts, and it became the Edge, and away we go. So that's a pretty good wrap up. I know I haven't forgotten anything. I know I've talked about every restaurant. No, I haven't. But wait, there's one more restaurant we have to talk about. The icon of the Coralville Strip, the restaurant that became the marquee, the restaurant that changed the way you ordered a hamburger, the restaurant that changed the way, brought a product to this town, to this day is nationally known. It came here. This is one of the very first places it was offered, and it was not offered as the main dish. It was offered as a side. We're going to talk about that right now. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about Charco's. And Charco's was, without question, the most iconic restaurant, drive-in, on the Coralville Strip. Let's take a look. This is Charco's on the Coralville Strip. The big giant Coca-Cola signs, the big across the front charcoal broiled hamburgers, malt shake sundaes, Charco's, not charcoals, Charco's. Now this was built there on the site of Dill Burger ended up on this site later. The Burger King ended up on this site later. Before that, Virgil Bowers had a sawmill down here. Now, if you're in Old Coralville, Virgil Bowers had sawmills about everywhere. He just kind of moved around, you know. When he could sell the land, he owned the land. And so Charco's came to town in about 1961. John and Jenny Grassi moved here from Pittsburgh, Kansas with their 2 kids, and they might have had a child when they moved here. Anyhow, Brian Grassi, who owns Kentucky Fried Chicken to this day in Iowa City. So Charco's came here in 1961. And you would drive in, and they had the menu board there, and you would push a button, and they would come on in the building and say, station number 6, what's your order? And you'd be in your car, and you'd have 5 or 6, 2 or 3 kids in your car. Maybe you had your girlfriend date. You'd go. Everybody went to Charco's. And I'm going to tell you this: these cars, as you see in there, this is a picture from the early '60s and late '50s. These drive-in lanes would be 4 and 5 deep, and on Sunday evenings. They would, Ron Grassi, he would be out there, and Denny Swales worked there. Lots of, Jane Vest worked there. Lots of people worked there. They'd be out directing traffic out here. This was the place to be. This was way before delivery pizza. If you wanted something, the college kids came over. This is Charco's. Well, lo and behold, about along in that time, a man came to see Mr. Grassy, and he came in an old beat-up station wagon, so the story goes, and he had kind of an older suit on, and he was kind of road weary and travel beat up, and he offered to them to sell them some fancy steam pans, pots and pans on which to make his recipe, and his name was Harlan Sanders, later known as Colonel Sanders. Well, John Grassy and looked at this business opportunity that he had to become the first purveyor and the first restaurant for this high-pressure cooked chicken. And part of the deal was you had to buy the pans. I have a picture of the pans. We'll get that up somewhere, sometime. Sometime you'll get to see that. So Mr. Grassy had to buy these high-pressure cooked pots, of which there are pictures available. And he had to buy the recipe of the mix to put on the chickens. And away they went. So ladies and gentlemen, I have here a couple things you probably would like to see. This is just an ad that they had in the newspaper. Charco's Drive-In, home of the famous Colonel Sanders recipe, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Finger-licking good, Highway 6 West, Coralville. Plus delicious charcoal burgers and a full menu of fine food. Call ahead. Well, that was wise, but when you got there, if you really, really were a local yokel, you would drive in the exit, walk up to the window and pick up your order. That's how us local yokels did it. If they weren't busy, then you just sat out there and enjoyed the ambiance of sitting there with your buddies, and it could be raining and you're underneath the umbrella, underneath the canopy down there. And without further ado, I'd like to show you the Charco's menu. And don't be trying to memorize that, because I have memorized this. This is G2. This is highly classified information that's been around for years and years and years. And here's how you would do that. You would pull into your station, and you and your buddies would all come up with an order, and then you'd push the button. Station number 2, what's your order? We'll have a number 2, a number 5, a number 14, a chocolate shake, a tot, a fry, onion rings. Wow, the onion rings. Let me tell you about the onion rings down there. They put them in a little onion ring, kind of a little cardboard boat, and they put one napkin over the top of it. And when you got them, it was almost a fist fight in the car. The onion rings were outstanding. So then later they would call you. Your order would go in, and the people worked inside there. Tom Gill here in Coralville worked. Lots and lots of kids worked down there. They would get your order ready to go. Station 4, drive to the window. You drive in there, pick up your order, and just drive to another part of the parking lot, sit there and eat it or take it home. Now, let's go through some of these. The char burger, and this was not on the flat top, this was charcoal broil. Char cheese, the char burger, char cheese, and the hamburger. All right? The chili burger. See, it's all burgers, they just put different toppings on. The chili dog, the grilled cheese, the barbecue beef sandwich, and ladies and gentlemen, number 11, the pork tenderloin sandwich was just as you would expect in Iowa. The giant elephant ear pork tenderloin sandwich, absolutely outstanding. They used a little bit bigger than normal hamburger bun, of course, hung out over the edges. And number 13, the iconic number 13 was called the Jawbreaker. And I can almost read it per se. 3 meat patties, lettuce, pickles, all those things, and it was a giant bun. 3 large patties. The Jawbreaker sold for 75 cents. That was the ultimate sandwich on the Coralville Strip, was the Jawbreaker. Nothing comes close to the Jawbreaker on any sandwich you want to buy in Coralville and the Coralville Strip of any of the hamburger places around. None of them come close to the Jawbreaker in size or taste. And down at the bottom down here, when Kentucky Fried Chicken became a menu, it was a side order. And you could get a 2-piece dinner for 89 cents. 2 pieces of chicken. You got 2 pieces of chicken, and you got a little roll that they somehow, I believe they fried it just a little bit. It was absolutely out. This is wonderful deep fat fried food, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we like, and they were good at it. And then they had the little addition of the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the 2-piece for 89 cents. And the 3-piece I have here 99 cents. I think the 3-piece dinner was $1.09. That's my recollection of that. And that had a 3-piece of chicken. It was a bigger deal. And Charco's, I don't know if we can ever get a shot of that, but there's the Charco's actual business. If you go down, I'm the historian, so if you go down to Copyworks, that's the site of Charco's. If you go down there and walk clear to the back of the parking lot, this building set clear to the back, you can see they've blacked up it, but you can see the footings of the building. Now, if that isn't the Coralville history archaeology, I don't know what is. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to sit here and say that the Grassy family came to town in the early 1960s and bought Charco's, and they brought Kentucky Fried Chicken to town. They sold that property down there and to Burger King, and Burger King moved in. Kentucky Fried Chicken now had taken over most of their business at Charco's. They moved up north on First Avenue, right south of the Canterbury, which is now, of course, right north of the present McDonald's. And they ran a KFC store, and they ran a KFC store on the east side of Iowa City, Towncrest. And then they moved it down on Highway 1 where they are today. We lost the Coralville KFC store due to health issues with one of the Grassy boys, and so that's why it's gone today. But think of this: when Mr. Sanders, Colonel Sanders, came to town, and John Grassy and his wife looked at that, they took the American spirit to heart, and they decided, you know, this is something we can add to our line to bolster business and bring business in. And lo and behold, what a gamble they took, and what it's turned out to be. So that kind of wraps up my history tour of the restaurants of Coralville. I'm glad you were along for this. I had a wonderful time to do it. Don't forget to, you see me on the street, don't forget to remind me that you remember your favorite place, or you hope this one comes here and that comes here. That's all part of this too. So without further ado, thank you for watching and listening to Coralville Restaurants Days Gone By. I'm Rex Brandstatter. Good day.